Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Once again, as we continue coming to you live from the Monarch Hotel in Rosebank, Johannesburg. Now, there is a delegation that is in South Africa at this point in time. And this is under the banner of the dream of freedom being crushed in Tunisia. Earlier on, we spoke with Yusra Ghannouchi, the daughter of Sheikh Rached Ghannouchi, and particularly looking at how the country has degenerated after the Arab Spring in 2011 and now under the brutal dictatorship of President Kais Saied. And with me this morning, part of the delegation is Ahmed Gaaloul, who was former Minister of Youth and Sport and also advisor to Sheikh Rached Ghannouchi. Sheikh Ahmed, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First of all, thank you for having me with you, and thank you for the audience who are listening to us. And I hope that what we are going to say will be meaningful to them and will inspire them to do something better on this earth.
Yes. Early on, I had a fascinating discussion with Yusra, the daughter of Sheikh Rached, who unpacked a lot because it is personal for her as the daughter of Sheikh Rached. But I'm sure for you as well, it's very, very personal because, you are the advisor, or you've been the advisor to Sheikh Rached as well, very, very closely associated. So I'm sure personal to you in terms of his plight and how this brutal dictatorship has actually has degenerated to such an extent where it's actually bringing an entire country down.
Well, my relationship with Sheikh Rached Ghannouchi dates since at least 1994. I mean, I was in my 20s at that time, so I've been with him since that time. Now he's in prison, but I'm still one of his advisors. I consider him like a father for me, since I've lost my father when I was not able to go back to my country during the 90s when we were together in London, fighting before the revolution to regain or to gain our freedom. And after that, we went back to Tunisia. And all the Tunisian people have enjoyed 10 years of total freedom, where they can express whatever they want and they can do whatever they want freely without the fear of any type of prosecution. So Tunisia was and is the country that was able to survive the counter-revolution wave after wave for 10 years. And Rached Ghannouchi, Sheikh Rached Ghannouchi, is one of the main persons and individuals and charismatic leaders who is behind the ability of Tunisia to survive the counter wave after wave, because the counter-revolution waves by committing political assassinations, by the coming of terrorism, started straightforward, almost less than 6 months after the first elections, 2012. And it was Rached Ghannouchi who called for an inclusive democratic process, and who said that he who enters the door of the constitution is part of the revolution. We are not going to consider people who were even member or part of the old regime as enemy of the revolution because of their history, but we will deal with them as they are doing now. If they accept the constitution which Tunisian people have chosen, then they are the sons of daughter of the revolution. That has enabled Tunisia to survive the first wave. And after that, I was advisor for the prime minister in the government of Ali Al-Rayed. And when the opposition decided that this elected government and this elected parliament should be dissolved, and they make a standing in front of the parliament blocking the elected parliament, we in the government have decided to defend them and not to allow anybody to aggress them. And Sheikh Rached and our party accepted to withdraw from the government so that we have a national dialogue which will enable the government, the country, first of all, to vote for the constitution, and to together with thanks to that debate, to decide about the future of the country, which has enabled Tunisia to have its second election in 2014, while other countries like Yemen, Libya, and Syria, and even sadly Egypt, fell into a lot of bloodshed and violence. So Rached Ghannouchi is the main driving force who was able to convince the members of our party and to convince other political parties and to convince regional players and international players that a Muslim or an Islamic party does not bring danger or terrorists. No, it's the opposite. So under our leadership, everybody can live and can enjoy total freedom and dialogue. So yes, Rached Ghannouchi is somebody who was, you could say, he played the role of the Tunisian Mandela. And actually, maybe Yusra was mentioning that, Rached Ghannouchi always mentions the example of South Africa, the example of Mandela, and how it has enabled South Africa not to get into a civil war. And this has actually enabled Tunisia to avoid a civil war, to avoid bloodshed. And even the coup that happened in Tunisia, it was not an expression of a civil war.
Yes. Sheikh Ahmed, from what you've just described, I can understand why Sheikh Rached Ghannouchi had such a huge impact on your life personally as a mentor, because just listening to you talk and talk about the person he is, his vision, and also in terms of what impact he's actually made not only on Tunisia, but the potential of making an impact on the African continent. And we always talk about great leaders on the African continent. You cited the example of Nelson Mandela, but in Sheikh Rached Ghannouchi, I see another Nelson Mandela from what you've described. Someone that is prepared to actually embrace everybody, someone who's prepared to forgive. And again, passionate about his country, passionate about taking his country forward, but also at the same time, that honor, that dignity, that respect that his people deserve and their rightful place in society and the continent.
Well, surely, yes, but we need to be aware that the level of the margin of tolerance, it has borders. So for Sheikh Rached Ghannouchi, he was ready to tolerate and to, let's say, give up space, but within the sphere of democracy, within the sphere of what Islam accepts, justice and debate. That's why on the 25th of Ramadan, the 14th of April, 2 years ago, Rached Ghannouchi said, when he was speaking about the current president, who presents himself as a defender of Islam, actually, he said that he personally would see himself with those who are right now in prison. And actually, there was a leadership of the opposition who were, some of them are Marxist, atheist, liberals, but those were fighting for freedom and democracy. He says, I see myself with them and part of them. However, I would not see myself with Qais Said, even if he presents himself as a defender of Islam, I do consider Qais Said as part of the counter-revolution. And here, this is important. He said, is there a middle way between us, those who are defending democracy, freedom, human rights, the rule of law, and Qais Said as a dictator who refuses any dialogue, who would like to exclude people, who would like to divide the Tunisian people? Is there a middle way between us and him? He said, there is no middle way between us. We cannot meet such people. So tolerance, it's not an open door. It is within on the ground of these values we tolerate. But once we have an oppressor, then we stand strong against him. And that is why Rached Ghannouchi right now in prison, he's quite calm, he's quite happy. And he knows that this is a phase which will go beyond, but there is no way of him tolerating this dictatorship and this oppression.
I think what you're saying is very, very true, obviously, Sheikh Ahmed, because, there are certain lines that should never, ever be crossed, and one cannot compromise, which is essentially what you are saying. And earlier on, when I was talking to Yusra as well, similar sentiments were expressed as well, but also in terms of a man with principles, and he's seen the bigger picture. We know that we are living in most countries in secular democracies, but again, aligning with an Islamic value system, aligning with an Islamic ethos. And that is what came out very, very strongly in my discussion with Yusra in terms of where her father had actually stood on those. And, for someone like yourself as an advisor to Sheikh Rached Ghannouchi, from a political perspective, you must have actually seen, and I'm sure you can comment on that alignment between his views on a secular democracy, how that actually ties in with our Islamic value system.
I mean, Islam as a, I will not say as a religion, because a religion describes the relationship of the creature with the creation. It's like so the term religion does not really translate the Arabic term deen, because Islam is a corpus of legislation, and those legislations relates to what we call worship and what we call public sphere and interactions, and that is what is called in Arabic Sharia. So as a corpus of legislations, Islam separates between ibadat, and corpus of laws and ethics, and the laws of Sharia, that is the corpus of muamalat, interactions. And the level of muamalat, Islam does not differentiate between people, whether they are Muslim or non-Muslims. So when Islam manages a public sphere, it deals with people according to their deeds, independently of their beliefs. So in regard to democracy, that's why Rached Ghannouchi speaks about Muslim democracy, because it is related to how we manage the public sphere. So if a Muslim is a Democrat, meaning this is how we perceive politics, this is how we allow people to decide about their fate, how they manage their country. And I'm going to make an alliance. I would go with a person, whether he's Christian or secular or black or white, male or female. I would see whether we do share the same values. This is the core concept of how Islam manages the public sphere. And this is what Rached Ghannouchi and what we call in Tunisia a Muslim democracy. And actually, this is not something which Rached Ghannouchi have created. It's not. This is what our Muslim scholars have been saying centuries and centuries. Now, the problem with modern states, with what we call the national states, is that it is a state which has inherited the Catholic Church the Protestant church. So it is secular because it doesn't believe in God anymore, apart from the secular, meaning the Anglo-Saxon system. But for the French laic system, there is no God. So, but the God is, the state becomes a God. So they decide of the fate of. So Islam in this way is closer to the Anglo-Saxon model of state, where you have a wider range of freedom and what you could call secular, meaning, but everything is religion, Islam, even dealing with other people, because we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will judge us on the day after in regard to our deed. So mu'amalat is not separate from our beliefs. And this is what differentiates Islam from the concept of secularism, because that's also religious. That's also part of our ibadah. How I treat my citizen justly is a way for me to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is why Islam is different from secularity, you could say.
Well, certainly. But also, I think, I just want to spend a few minutes focusing on your views and perhaps I'm sure Sheikh Rached Ghannouchi as well on political Islam and governance, particularly in the times that we are living in. Now, sometimes the word democracy is actually thrown around very, very loosely because we see democracy as defined in Western terms, very, very different compared to a democracy as Islam would actually view it, because we see, when one looks at democracy, for example, the cornerstone of democracy is capitalism. We've seen so much corruption, the huge gap between rich and poor, the corruption in governments. This is what actually leads to dictatorships like we see in Tunisia under Qais Said as well. And we see it in many other parts around the Arab world. So just to unpack some of that and just to understand your views, looking at it from a political perspective, and to understand what Islam truly means from a democratic perspective.
Well, surely Islam is like what Sheikh ibn Ashur, who came before Sheikh Rashid, and he was the Imam al-A'zam of the University of Zaytuna in Tunis. And he is a scholar who wrote Sharia and Tafsir al-Quran, the exegesis of Quran. He's one of the most prominent scholars, Muslim scholars. And with him, actually, his colleague Al-Khidr Hussein, who became the dean of Jamal Azhar, Imam Jamal Azhar. He's Tunisian and he went there. He has a book about freedom in Islam. And he has a chapter in it who speaks about حرية الاعتقاد, the freedom of belief in Islam. So, and then we have Sheikh Rached coming after that. All these scholars, at least modern scholars, because Nashur and Khidr Hussein during the beginning of the previous century, up to 1960, 1970. So the concept, Nashur says, or Islamic government is democratic, but it is different. 80% of power, it's at the hand of the people, while 20% it is at the hand of the government. So the different state is quite different. And Islam, as I have mentioned, allows differences within society. It allows even what we call communitarian rule. If you are a Muslim, let's say, and you are a Maliki, so you have the right to go to a Maliki judge. If I am Hanafi, I have the right to go to a Hanafi judge. If I am Christian, I will go to my church to get the ruling, to a Christian church, whether a Protestant church or a Catholic church. That's how tolerant is Islam to multiplicity in society. And that's how different the Muslim democracy from what we call a modern one. The other thing which is different also is what modern state calls national interest. So the concept of national interest, it allows a country, if you are a citizen of a country, you are sacred for that country. But your country have the right to go and kill outside. You have the right to go and bomb other people outside. While in Islam, you don't have the right to do so. And that's why you have Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab, who said, if a camel, gets hurt in street of Iraq, which was very far, I fear Allah that he would come and ask me, why didn't I pave the route for her?
Absolutely.
So the concept of national interest is different. The concept of interest within the Muslim state is universal. We do not have the right as citizens or as a government, let's say, of South Africa, to go and kill other people in Palestine or Iraq. So what is happening right now for, I don't know, let's say the British government or the American government, they don't have the right to go and bomb the Afghani, or they don't have the right to help the Zionists bombing in Yemen or in Iran right now, or they don't have the right to sell arms or to support the Zionist government, as that contradicts the ruling of Islam. So there are many differences between what we call a Muslim democracy and what we call right now a democracy.
I think, what you've given me is quite a deeper insight into Sheikh Rached Ghannouchi and his views, and particularly looking at democracy from an Islamic perspective. And it's just so much that one can actually think about. But just to move on and also to look at Tunisia, obviously the Arab Spring started off with Tunisia, was the removal of Ben Ali, and it mushroomed across through to Egypt, Hosni Mubarak. We know what had taken place in Yemen as well. And also just to try and understand what is it that these despots, as dictators, and for Tunisia to again get back into a situation where you are ruled by a dictator in Qais Said, okay, to get back into the situation. What is it that they fear so much from people like Sheikh Rached Ghannouchi, the views that he holds? And we see it across the entire Arab world. We've seen in the aftermath of the Arab Spring when Hosni Mubarak was removed, Mohammed Morsi was there for a brief period of time. He was then taken out as well. And, again, back to despotic rule. There again, when one sees in the Gulf countries, in Egypt as well, the Ikhwan is seen as a threat as well. It's just that I'd like to understand what is it that they fear so much when it comes to certain personalities that hold certain views.
What they fear is how appealing are these ideas. Because if
it's ideological.
Yeah, if these ideas were radical, then they will not fear them, because they know that radical views will appeal to a very narrow section of the society, and will appeal to a very narrow section of people, whether they agree with you or not with you. So radicals radical views, it's very easy, first of all, to infiltrate them, and it's very easy to isolate them, and it is very easy to demonize them. While if you have these appealing views, which are open to all mankind, and which can be appealing to Muslims and non-Muslims, because we do share with all these people the common ground of humanity. This is what we call in Islam that it is a deen of fitra, because it is the deen, the religion, let's say, for the purpose of communication, of man as it has been created firstly. So this is Islam. Islam is what we as a human being have in our inner self. So these values, they do appeal to our nature. That's why for those dictators, for those oppressors who would like to have their hand on our wealth, on our land, they don't tolerate that our people have the freedom to decide what they want to do, especially in this time, because we need Tunisia is at the heart of the Mediterranean. It is also part of the Arab world. We need to remember that the term Afriqa is the name of Tunisia, actually. Tunisia is called Afriqiya. Africa as a continent right now is a rising continent. It is a country, it is a continent where we have the highest level of youth, where we have the highest level of wealth, where people right now aspire for the future, for their freedom, and where people have suffered for more than a century and a half from oppression, from deprivation of their wealth, from segregation in their society, from imposing borders on them, superficial borders. This continent is rising right now. When a fellow country, North Africa, like we are right now in South Africa, decides that it is time for us as African to rise up and to give an example that we can be free, and our freedom is different from the oppressive freedom, and that it is our right to seek justice. They do not tolerate that. That is why a coup has happened. It was not the aspiration of the Tunisian people. It was a regional conspiracy that has led and pushed towards this coup. And it is this regional and international conspiracy that is preserving this coup to survive, because it is a failing coup, it is a populist president, and the Tunisian people right now are suffering in a way that they did not during the last century.
Sheikh Ahmed, just looking at the reason why you are here in South Africa, and let's talk about this dream of freedom that is being crushed in Tunisia, and the reason for you being here. And I'm sure you're going to be sending out a very powerful message. Not many people, as we had that discussion earlier on, that not many people in South Africa, and I think even in other parts around the world, are aware of the plight of Sheikh Rached Ghannouchi and also many of the other prisoners. And I know there are many, many people that have been tried also and sentenced in absentia as well, given long prison sentence terms as well. And this is obviously something that needs to come out in the open. It needs to be highlighted. It's a campaign that needs to be internationalized as well. So let's just talk about, your purpose here and how do you see this campaign going forward from here?
I mean, we are, let's say, the world is going through a very hard time. And what we call the free democratic world is not any more interested in defending the values of freedom and democracy. Right now, what is described as a free world, meaning the West, is interested in how to put his hand on wealth and to grab wealth again, the same thing which has happened during the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century. So defending democracy, human rights, the rule of law is not the interest of these powerful countries anymore. We African would need to stand together so that we preserve our right to live, and our right in freedom and justice. So when I come from North Africa, from Tunisia to South Africa, we are trying to reach out to our brothers and to the example which was able to survive after decades of oppression, so that it regained, the people of South Africa regained their freedom and justice, and they are still struggling to reach and to fulfill their dreams in justice, equality, and an equal system for the wealth, so that we don't have this wide segregation between the different composition of the South African country. South Africa right now is a country, is one of the main countries. It is the country that is standing by human values, the values of freedom, the values of justice, and the rule of law. And this is what it is doing, for example, in the case of Palestine. So when we come here, we are reaching out from the north of Africa to the south of Africa, so that we have like both hands united together as a continent in defending our common interest, because we are a continent that is targeted, like it has been the case during the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, by the main powers of the world, the conflicting powers of the world. And our land will be the battleground of their conflict. And those fights, they have nothing to do with us Africans. So that is why we come to South Africa, first of all, to raise awareness about what is happening in Tunisia, and to say that we are still fighting for our freedom, and that we will not allow this oppression to crush our freedom, and that we are still free people, even though there is a dictator, but we are still fighting. And that this fight, it is our fight. And the proof that it is the same fight, what happened with the African immigrant who are coming from the sub-Saharan region and who are being blocked by this dictator in Tunisia and put in ghettos and being tortured. Many of them has been taken away, thrown in the desert to death. Mothers with their babies, and there are pictures of that, videos of that. Fathers with his family, young ones, young Africans, trying to reach the dream in the north. While Qais Said has signed an agreement with the European countries that he will use our land, Tunisia, as a prison and ghetto for our African brothers and sisters, so that they cannot go back or move forward. So you can see that the fall of democracy in Tunisia, it's not only us Tunisians who are suffering from that, but our fellow sub-Saharan African people are suffering from it, because and Tunisia right now is being used, as I said, as a prison, as a ghetto place for all African youth, so they cannot fulfill their dreams.
How do you see the various sectors of Africa, whether we're looking at it from a government perspective, organizations like the African Union, civil society, activists, media? Because I think what you've mentioned is absolutely serious. This is critical, where people are actually left to die in a desert. And this is not, widely publicized in the media as well, in African media as well. And this should be a campaign on its own to highlight what is actually happening on our very own continent. And how do you propose, this sort of campaign, so that this message gets pronounced right across the continent, and people take a serious look at what is taking place here.
South Africa is one of the rare countries, sadly, in Africa that is enjoying freedom and democracy. I know every democracy has its problems, but there is a level of freedom which is enjoyed here in South Africa, which is not available in many other African countries. The other thing, symbolically, South Africa is one of the main symbols of the strive and struggle of Africans, so that they were able to regain their freedom and to build and to strive to build a better future. Voices from South Africa are very important. If they do stand up and stand by us in our fight for freedom and democracy, but also in our the fight against racism, which is right now happening in Tunisia, because there is actual racism, which has never happened in our history. I mean, if you are being chased in street just because of the color of the skin, I mean, I personally could not imagine that this could happen in my Muslim country, in my African country. And this happened in Tunisia. It is happening even for Tunisian citizens who are black. Many of them have been arrested because they were black. And the president of the country came and addressed the word that these people who are being sent from the sub-Saharan region, they are here in order to replace us and to change the democracy of the country.
Xenophobic.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is I mean, this is really serious. This has nothing to do with Islam. This has nothing to do with I mean, many of our sub-Saharan brothers, they used to come and live, and they lived for more than at least a decade where we were there. They were there with us. They were there with us like any other Tunisian or like any other person who was there in the street. We had no problem with that. Suddenly we have this new discourse, and he's saying it so that he will get support from these European countries, so that they will keep him there as a guardian of their interest. So South Africa, and speaking out for these issues in North Africa, in Tunisia, from South Africa, is very important, and it will have a positive effect on what is happening in Tunisia, even if it doesn't have the direct effect, basically changing situation, but it really helps. So any free voice who would stand up and defend these values, we do need it, because this is actually the same fight. I mean, you cannot have I mean, something which is collapsing at the north and sit safe that it will not happen to you.
Exactly. I don't think we can actually retreat into our comfort zone, which is essentially what you're saying. I know, you've been here in Johannesburg now. You're going to be making your way to Cape Town, and hopefully, this is going to be the beginning of a campaign that will spread its tentacles far and wide as well. And for us at Salam Media, I must say, it's been an absolute pleasure that we were given this opportunity to meet with you also, but also at the same time to once again reinforce why this is so important, why what is taking place in Tunisia is for people to sit up, to take notice, and to take things seriously. At the end of the day, it's happening under our very own noses as well. We share so much in common. We are on the African continent, and again, we need to have each other's backs. We need to look after each other, and what troubles you has got to trouble us. And at the end of the day, again, it stems from our Islamic values as well, where we know that the hadith is clear. The Muslim Ummah is like a body. When a part of a body is in pain, the rest of the body is in discomfort. And we feel your pain, we feel your discomfort as well. But once again, Sheikh Ahmed, I must say it's been an absolute pleasure. And for you taking time out, for making time for us here at Salam Media to conduct this discussion with you this morning.
Thank you very much, brother.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sheikh Ahmed Gaaloul with us this morning, right here at the Monarch Hotel. Again, another fascinating discussion, I must say. But again, it's the message that is clear, the message that is so profound, a message that is very, very powerful, where we see what is taking place on the African continent when we look at the history of colonization and the consequences that this continent, and yet this continent still continues suffering. And once again, highlighting the dire situation on our continent when racism is once again being embraced by dictators, by despots, by people left to actually die in deserts, mothers and babies. This is what this continent cannot afford. And once again, to remind ourselves, we need to be aware, we need to be informed, we need to educate ourselves as far as what is taking place. And again, we're talking about a figurehead as we revere Nelson Mandela in South Africa, Rached Ghannouchi, Sheikh Rached Ghannouchi, equally needs to be revered, because a giant amongst giants as far as politics is concerned, but also in terms of taking this continent forward. It's about a man who is a visionary as well. While he is in prison at this point in time, not resting, but showing concern about humanity. Earlier on, when we spoke to Yusra Ghannouchi, she spoke about his writings on Palestine, his concerns, his close affinity, his close association with Palestine, and I'm sure close association and a concern for all oppressed people right across the entire world, including the African continent. And with that, we are terminating our broadcast right here from the Monarch Hotel. It's been an absolute pleasure once again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.